Hello, my name is Sean Little, and you are tuning into the Yellow Coat Club podcast. This is episode one of who knows how many episodes, and I'm really glad to have you here. I'm glad to have you tuning in with me today. And this idea for the podcast was really birthed out of an idea for a book that was put on my heart to write around the pandemic. During that time, I was going through a huge life transition, and I was experiencing freedom in my life, and just some super incredible things that were happening. And if you remember, if you were there during that time, also this was March of 2020, like the whole country, the whole world almost shut down because of the pandemic. And in that moment, I felt like so many of us were forced to into that silence, into that separation from other people, and it caused us to slow down. And if you're one of those people, I was right there along with you, and I did my mind went to a place where I feel comfortable, which was that creation stage. That what are you calling me to create? What are you calling me to do? I feel this newness, this change, this shift happening in life, and so. There I was, and, all of a sudden, I just felt it hit me that it's like, hey, you have a story of your life that needs to be told. Not for vanity, not for, for people to look at you and, oh my gosh, look at all of the things that you've overcome. But because there's this story that I've lived, these things that, I've been brought through and continue to be brought through, that I'm like, I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one that has struggled with an array of just like life controlling, issues, thoughts, beliefs. Some of those are, addiction, people pleasing, wearing masks and, different labels and becoming a version of yourself that one day you wake up and you're like, who am I? How did I become the person that I am today? And I had so many times in my life where I felt like I was out of integrity with myself, that what I was living and who I was did not equate to who I said I was, let alone who I wanted to be. And so, we'll get into all of that and more as we journey through this podcast. But today I just want to focus on, where did this come from? This name, the Yellow Coat Club. And so it has a really cool origin story, and I'm really excited to share that with you today. This is, very much linked to a book that I've written and, technically I'm writing. And so depending on when you listen to this, if it's been, years from the first episode, like, hey, there's a book out there. And if it's, you're hearing this before the book's out, there's a book coming called The Yellow Coat Club. And the subtitle is The Courage to Stop Hiding and Start Becoming. And so I'm going to bring you back to a time in my life. And so, I'll unpack things much further, through each episode. But I am, real quick about me, I am a middle child, one of three. My dad passed away when I was 9. My mom passed away when I was 14. In between my dad's death and my mom's death, my mom got remarried. We lived in, not the best situation. And I can talk about that, later down the road, but really it wasn't anybody else. It was just, I was riddled with anxiety. I was riddled with this insecurity of, not being comfortable in my own skin. And that started from a very early age, and it never went away. It just kind of followed, and it strung through time. And, after my mom died, I, ended up moving with my aunt and uncle and all of their kids, and I had an eating disorder, and then went off to college and went my own way and got into drugs and alcohol and addiction and all of these things just plaguing my life. Meanwhile, having this forever battle with faith, which I'll talk about. And so you have all of these things happening, the people pleasing, the trying and experimenting with all of these different, vices that I thought that I needed to have to be that person that people wanted me to be, that I in my head was like, that's who I need to be. And it all came crashing down when I multiple times was just, I felt like I was in conflict with myself. You wake up one day and You look at your hands, you look at your face in the mirror, and you're like, man, I say that I'm one person, and yet everything that I'm doing says the other. And that was really difficult. And so I kept hiding, you know? I would hide behind, alcohol, and I would hide behind addiction. I would hide behind just stories in general, blaming other people, not taking responsibility for my own actions and how I was showing up in the world. And so um, there obviously came a point in my life when I had to start facing those things, admitting to myself that if I wanted to live this life that I could not even almost, it's like weird to like not even dream of, I had to start shedding all of these things. And it was embodied in what I talk about as the yellow coat. So back in 2015, I was, heavy drinker then. I was, working, multiple jobs, keeping it together. I honestly, if you, from the outside looking in, minus probably my drinking, somebody could have looked at me and been like, wow, like with all of the things that he's faced from young, like he's making it, he's got housing, he's got a car, he's, graduated from college, is about to start going and getting a master's degree. Like, there were all of these external things that could have pointed to, man, he's got it together, and honestly, the probably the closer proximity you had to me, the closer it was like, ooh, yeah, it doesn't fully have it together. And so, and in that, it was like one of those, how do I keep people at a distance so they don't really know what's going on? Fake it till you make it. I'm going to show the world what I think they want to see. I'm going to show them what I want them to see, because I am terrified of letting somebody in and seeing the brokenness that I feel inside. The bondage that I felt to all of these different vices, all of these different things that I never felt true to myself. And so anyways, I had a roommate at the time. I was living at his house. I worked with him as well, good friend. And, him and I worked at the same place, and we would get these discounts for, different vendors. And one of them happened to be Patagonia. So Patagonia, super amazing, company. And so, they would send out these catalogs, and, we'd see them, and, we'd start looking at, oh man, I want that thing, or I want that thing. And so it was fall of 2015. And I went to the mailbox, and, in comes, the Patagonia catalog. Yes, they used to have paper catalogs. I still think they make them, but for most people, depending on your age, like, oh yeah, they used to make those in paper. It wasn't all digital. And so there I am, like looking through it, and, I'm like, oh yeah, that looks cool. That looks cool. And then finally I just like stopped dead in my tracks. Like I remember that moment, just seeing it, and I was like, oh, whoa. And it was this, if you're familiar with their stuff, it is this hooded nano puff jacket, like one of their quintessential Patagonia things. And it was bright yellow. Like I remember seeing that. And it's not like, not like a mellow yellow or something like that. Like if you think of like a dandelion, like how bright yellow a dandelion is. Like it was that. And so I saw it, and I was like, man, that is really cool. And I had a moment there. And it sounds weird to think like, okay, you saw a coat, and how did you have some existential moment? But it felt like that. And it was like this representation of like all of the inside of me that wanted to live loud. You imagine if you go to like the little tile thing that you can see on the podcast, you go to my website, theyellowcoatclub.com, like you can see the OG coat, and it is very yellow. It's loud. And when I think of just, it's not just the color, it's not just the fabric, it's you put it on, this willingness to be seen, to stand out, amidst the crowd, to not just comply with everything around you, but to be your own person. And so I saw it, and I was like, man, you kind of put a little dog ear in the page, and, went on with my day. And my roommate came home later, and, him and I were chit-chatting a little bit. He had been at work that day, and, he I asked him, I said, "Hey, like, did you see the catalog today?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we were looking through it at work and, we, saw all these things." And I said, "Dude, I got to show you something." And so I went and I opened the page and I put it in front of him. I was like, I want that. And he like smirked at me. And I remember thinking like, oh, like, is this a really bad idea? And he said, "Dude, like a bunch of us saw that at work today. And we were even like, who would wear something like that?" And he said that they kind of all had this general consensus, like, that's a Sean coat. And I remember thinking in that moment that, what does that mean? Like was it couldn't have just been that it was this bright yellow color, but it was this loud, not loud as in, yeah, you talk really loud, which I do. But it was also like this willingness to be bold, to be fun, to be, to live big. And I think that in my life at that time, there were glimpses of me living like that. And yet, I think those were in the moments that I was almost kind of like lost in the moment. And what I mean by that is I spent so much time thinking about what other people thought of me that it distracted me from being able to even focus on like who I thought like I wanted to be. That idea of becoming Sean. It was always, how do I look a certain way? How do I, catch the attention of this person? How do I say the right thing? How do I make the right moves? And always constantly analyzing doing the right thing. And in that, it almost seemed like I was constantly untrue to myself. And yet here is not only one person, but a group of people saying, wow, that's a Sean coat. And so I remember I obviously I ordered it. I own it. It's amazing. But at the time I ordered it and I got it in the mail. And I remember even seeing it, like it was in my hands. And I had another one of those moments of like, but yeah, when am I going to wear this? It honestly, like, it was this embodiment of everything that I wanted to be and a reminder of everything that I thought that I wasn't. The moment I put it on, it would be this, that the world would be looking at me. First off, that's super egotistical. Like, honestly, like, if I lived my life thinking that if people were whispering over in a corner, I just assumed that it was about me. Like, what do I have on my face right now? Is my fly undone? Something like that. That was all my life. And it's so egocentric, but it also comes from a very insecure place of living. That to think that so many people are just that concerned about you, because it's just not the case. And at the same time, it's just like it was a light into my world that it's like, dude, people don't care if I have on a yellow coat, but I do. Because that was the representation of me being able to reclaim being Sean. I have a son that's coming in September, our first son, and I can't wait for him to be here. And in throughout the entire book, I have these letters, and I'll explain those a little bit here. But some of them are to a younger me, and the others are to my unborn son. And my wish, for him, and in one of the letters, I literally say to him, like, I wanted to be Sean, just like I want you to be Jack. From a very, very young age, I was living for approval from my mom. And I could see it. I can see the thread of time where, and I talk about it is, I see the three siblings. I see the roles that we played in my mom's life. And I feel like, of the most, I was the people pleaser. I was the one that, was the compliant one. And in that, I remember there's this moment. I 2 summers ago, I was back in Michigan and I was visiting my brother, and he he said, him and I were spending some time together, and he just looked at me and randomly kind of, we'd been talking about mom, and he just goes, hey, you know you're mom's favorite, right? And it was interesting because I don't think either of my siblings had ever acknowledged that. I'd felt it, but no one had ever acknowledged it. And so he said that, and I remember sitting there, and because of just the healing and the journey in, the becoming that I've gone through, I looked at him and I said, yeah, I do. And it brought a whole world of problems that I've had to deal with. And honestly, for me, that was one of the greatest pressures in my life, was constantly trying to measure up. I want to fit in. We moved around a lot as kids. I want to fit in with this group, or I want to fit in at this new school. I want to be accepted by my family, but I also feel like I don't know what's going on with me. I feel so alienated from the world, and yet I was surrounded by so many people. It's one of the craziest things that you can think of, is to be surrounded by humans and at the same time feel so far away, so isolated. And that was where I lived. I was constantly trying to be something that I was not. And so the yellow coat, as we unpack this, as we walk through this journey, as you read the book, as you engage on the site, as you engage in the podcast, the yellow coat is a physical thing. I own this yellow coat, but it is the embodiment of that becoming who we were created to be. It is shedding whatever layers that you have on today that somebody else put on you, or you put on yourself because you thought that's who you were supposed to be, and putting on that coat that was made for you. Maybe yours isn't yellow. Could be purple, could be polka dotted. It's not a matter of the color, it's that the putting on, that continually waking up every single day and choosing that I'm going to take that coat off the hanger today and I'm going to put it back on. I'm going to take that coat off the hanger and I'm going to put it back on again and again and again, because I'm going to courageously choose to become the person that I was created to be. And yet so many of us, find ourselves, veering from that. At least I know that I did. And I know I'm not the only one. That's the whole reason for the book. It's the whole reason for the podcast. It's the whole reason for any of this, this idea that was just put on my heart, was that I know I'm not the only one. And I want to create a space where people can come in and go, man, that's me. I remember when I struggled with that. There's somebody else. And I think that it takes somebody taking the first step and going, man, like this is where I'm at. And I want to invite you into that journey. Because for the longest time, my sister said to me earlier this year, and it just stuck with me, well, she said, one of my favorite things about you is you stopped asking others for permission to be you. Imagine, it's like, I think of that metaphor of putting on the coat, that getting dressed, and you literally wake up each day and, you go to somebody for validation and say, hey, do you mind if I wear this today? Like, oh, hey, I was thinking about doing this thing. Do you mind if I, put this on? No. You need to. What kind of life is that? And yet I lived it. For over 30 years of my life, I felt like I literally lived at the pleasure of another person. And at some point you just realize that you lose yourself in it. And so throughout this journey together, that stop hiding, be courageous and stop hiding. That hiding is the embodiment of so many different things, the labels we wear, the masks that we wear, the things that we're unwilling to, announce, where we're living in darkness. Oh man, I could never tell anybody that. Oh, if I told somebody that, I wouldn't be accepted. There's a very, very impactful line. I mean, imagine I'm the one that wrote the book, and every time I read the line, I'm like, oh my God. And not like a pat on my back, but it's like, dude, that's like an inspired. The line is, I'll be anything you want me to be, as long as you'll love me. Like, imagine if that was the agreement that you made with yourself and the rest of the world. I'll be anything you want me to be, as long as you'll love me, as long as you'll accept me. I don't care about who I want to be. I will be anything that you want me to be. Just love me. We all want that. Whether we admit it or not, we want to be loved. We want to be accepted. We want to be, admired and, adored by somebody. But we get caught up in the, at least where I was, if they ever knew the real me, how would they ever be able to love me? And so we continue to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the hiding. The reality is that you can hide from other people. Literally by proximity, you can hide from other people. You don't answer their calls, you stop showing up at events. Like you can hide that. And I did it. I was a drunk. By the time I was 28, I was a very, very high consuming alcoholic, and I tried to hide my drinking as best I could. But it was like the alcohol was just a symptom. The drinking was a symptom of how broken I felt inside. All of these things I didn't want to admit, the weight stacking up of what I felt and grappled with as being a failure, as thinking that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy enough, that you see, you apply for a job and you don't get it, and you're like, oh, pass by again, pass by again, pass by again. A door closes in your life and you're like, oh man, another breakup with somebody, and you're like, oh man. And you continue to start stacking up all of the evidence going, man, I'm really not worth much, am I? And yet, as I have come to believe in my life, as I sit here and stand today, that every closed door is an opportunity for stepping into, in my belief, that yellow coat. We have these things, oh, I want to go do that, I want to go do that, and you have the door closed and you're like, wait, what? And at some point you keep trying, or you realize that door is shut for a reason. This like guiding, all the way to this growth, this progressive, thing that is happening where you're like, oh, but that's me. There's doors that I wish had been open, and had they been open, there's so many experiences in my life that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. I might not have met my wife. I might not have, been introduced to this fellowship that I'm a part of. Like, there are so many crazy things. And if you look back over the span of your life, you're like, oh man, you can really glob onto all of the doors shut and the negative things. And at the same time, you should be looking at, but where were the yeses? And are you slowly, even if it's just like barely a walk, are you becoming more and more in integrity with yourself? This is true to who I am. This is true. I'm not living for that person's acceptance. I'm not living to please that person, but this is true to me. And I'm not talking about, absolute truth or universal truth. You know exactly what I mean when I say you're living your most integrous, authentic life. This is who I was made to be. Because in the hiding, remember, I could smile, I could put on the face, shake the hands, kiss the babies, whatever it is. I went a little presidential there on you, and yet you can put on whatever face, but at the end of the day, you have to go to bed with you. And when you go into the bathroom and you look in that mirror, you have to stare into the face of the person that you've become. And so in this book, we talk about, stop hiding. And we'll talk about that in the podcast. I mean, I'll probably do multiple episodes on the things that we hide from, because we live in a world where we're encouraged to hide. And then that next part, which is to start becoming. And that word is active. The word is becoming. I firmly believe, and it is honestly one of the most off-putting, it's one of the most off-putting things for me, is when people live in such a way that they believe they have arrived. So let me play this out for you. Let me editorialize a little bit. You have somebody who has gone through healing. I have overcome alcoholism. But if you constantly take the posture of like, man, I have arrived. I beat that thing. Then you're not constantly working through and doing the work to make sure that you keep weeding out all of the things that really led you to drink. Now imagine, we are humans, complex humans. We're messy. We have baggage. And even if we've become free from something, we still have baggage. We pick it up all the time. We have stories that are running our lives. We have narratives that literally creep in. We get triggered by things. We start to believe different things. So you can sit there and say, I'm healthier than I was before. I am further along than I was before. But the moment that you start acting as though you've arrived is this, well, I have become. No, I am becoming. It's this idea that we acknowledge, I haven't learned everything. I'm always going to keep growing. I'm always going to keep striving. And this isn't self-deprecating in the way of oh man, don't celebrate, the milestones or the big things. No, celebrate those things. But always be willing to have a posture of, there's this work to be done. The work never ends because life doesn't end. We get triggered every single day by somebody or something. It just happens. And in that, stories creep in. And so I could sit here today and tell you, I am free from, insert whatever thing of my past, whatever people pleasing. But it's not true. Do I seek to please people less than I did before? 100%. But do I not people please anymore? No, because I have bosses. I have people that I find myself agree with. And there's literally moments where I'm like, oh, whoa. Why are you agreeing with that thing? And so I've had to start putting my foot down to literally be like, I don't agree with that. And it's okay. But it doesn't mean that I just magically don't have that anymore. And so many people, when they take the posture of, well, I've arrived, is first off, it's a little, to me, pompous, I guess you're not like the rest of us. But then also there's that, what happens to growth? What happens to moving forward and striving and working through those things? And honestly, there was only, that's almost claiming that there's perfection in an area of our life. And we know that perfection is just not true. And ask anybody, me included, the people that lived their life as, the perfectionist, how that worked out for them. How's that working out for you now? Well, it's never achievable, and therefore it drives you insane. And so throughout this podcast and in reading the book and in going to the website and just the dialogue and the community and everything, I want us to have the courage to take the things that we're talking about and really go after, where am I hiding? And as we move away from hiding, we start to open up this door of possibility. Who am I to become? And you can sit there and be able to look at people and you can just say, yeah, I'm becoming. I'm becoming a version of me that I never thought possible. And it started with me just having the courage to stop hiding and to set my, sights on what if there was something different. That's when you open your catalog one day. That's when you open the closet one day and you realize, oh, there's my yellow coat. And you go and you get it and you put it on and you make sure that you repeat that action every single day. Because I promise you that, the life that I've been able to start living, and it's not a matter of all, accolades or anything like that. It's just freedom. And if you've tasted freedom, if you've lived in that sweet space of living in integrity, and most importantly, that belonging to yourself, I mean, it's unmatched. It's unmatched. In the last thing I'll leave us with is in the opening of the book, I talk about this for those of you that know who Woody Allen is, famous director, and he had this movie from back in the day called Annie Hall. And I remember watching that movie back when I was like 24, and he opened, the opening scene has this monologue where he's literally just looking at the camera, and he says, I would never want to belong to a club that would accept someone like me as a member. I remember thinking how odd that is. You wouldn't want to be a part of a club that would accept you as a member. And yet I look back over my life and I think, man, until probably my early 30s, I wouldn't have wanted to be in a club with a me either. And the reason being is that we would have all just been very fake. We would have all, done our best to live in integrity and be vulnerable with one another and tell half-truths, but we'd all be living in hiding. Close proximity, all in hiding. And so we'd all be fake versions of ourselves, telling each other what we want to hear. And honestly, like life in general just felt too much like that. And, fast forward to today, I do want to belong to a club that would have me as a member. Because the standards of that club would be based on us being, dude, whatever you got, we got. People have such an easy time talking about the things that they've gone through. But it's a whole nother thing to be able to talk through, here's what I'm going through right now. We like to be the overcomer, but when we're caught in the thick of it, it's almost as if we white knuckle it and think, I'm going to do this on my own. Looking at the past and going, how well did that work out for you then? And so the Yellow Coat Club is a club. This is an invitation for you to engage with the content, engage, sending emails, giving feedback, whatever it is, that we create this community of vulnerability. That we create this community where we say, we're going to be courageous. We're going to stop hiding and we're going to start becoming. And so with that, I'm really excited for where this is headed, because I have no idea. This in itself is part of the becoming. And I'm just, my hope is at the end of the day, if there is one person who finds hope and healing and finds their yellow coat through the podcast, through the book, then it will all be worth it. It will all be worth it. Thank you, and until next time.